This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek.fm.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Hello, this is Captain Tilly. What the hell? What the hell? Hold your horses!
Welcome, everyone, to Notes from the Edge, a subshow of our Star Trek Discovery podcast, The Edge. I'm C Bryan Jones, or Chris, and I'll be your host as we flip through the pages of our notebook. In Notes from the Edge, we'll explore connections between Discovery and the greater Star Trek universe, which includes the prior 6 TV series and 13 films, as well as the massive literary universe, because there are elements from there that are being worked into the series. And we'll also delve deeper into some of the ideas unique to Discovery. I kick off each episode of Notes with my thoughts on the latest episode of Discovery, which this time means Despite Yourself. As Discovery returns from the mid-season break, we find ourselves, unsurprisingly, in the Mirror Universe, and that environment dominates most of the discussion of this episode. But there are a few other connections, so altogether, I'll cover 5 main points in the Thoughts section: Lorca, Tilly, Ash Vogler, Kolber's death, and I'm doing that in air quotes, and who the Emperor might be. Then in the Notes section, I'll cover Organia, Essex, the USS Defiant, and begin touching on the Mirror Universe. Now that last point is so broad, both in on-screen canon and the extended universe, that I'm not going to even try to cover it all in detail in one episode. I think we're going to be in the Mirror Universe for several episodes of Discovery, so I'll spread that out across the next few episodes of Notes as needed. But I will open there. So, where to begin? Most fan reaction that I've seen has been over the moon in love with Despite Yourself, the ISS Discovery, and this story's Terran Empire wrappings. My initial reaction was a giant meh, and that surprised most everyone I talked to this week. So hang in there with me in this episode, because I might sound a bit more negative at times than you are accustomed to, but I'm just exploring storytelling expectations and how elements are used. And when I'm critical of Star Trek, it's because I love it so much, and sometimes I expect a bit more from it, and I just want to honestly share how I feel about some of the things that we saw in this episode. If you've been listening to me for very long, and certainly for the more than 7 years that I've been podcasting about Star Trek, then you know that my overall mission, and the reason I created this network in the first place, is constructive discussion of this world that we love. So don't misunderstand the things I say and why I say them. So, there are a few reasons for my reaction. One of the first is that I'm just not the biggest fan of the Mirror Universe. I love Mirror Mirror. It has always been one of my favorite episodes of the original series. It was a fun idea when presented in 1967, and it was great fun when DS9 did crossover, because after TNG never went to the Mirror Universe, we weren't expecting DS9 to do so. All we had was Diane Duane's Dark Mirror, a TNG Mirror Universe novel published in December 1993. And I also had that on audiobook, on cassette, and I wore that out in my car. So At that point in time, I would say I really loved the Mirror Universe, but it was along the way where my love for it faded a bit. But sticking to that point in time, in May 1994, when DS9 gave us a glimpse of the aftermath of Kirk's actions from Mirror Mirror, and subsequently those of Spock, it was amazing. I love the way they tied into the original story and still did it in Deep Space Nine wrappings. And then DS9 went on to build a whole story set in the Mirror Universe that played out over the course of the series, but it was interweaved with the main narrative of the show, and it never disrupted the storytelling. It was good. Then came Enterprise and In a Mirror Darkly. I know these are fan favorites that regularly top Best of Enterprise lists, but they have always been my least favorite episodes of Enterprise, a show that I really love. It's not that I hate them, I just feel that these episodes failed to live up to their potential and were essentially a fanboy romp in the TOS era thrown into the fourth season. I suppose that at the time Mike Sussman was writing them, there was the thought that they could return to the storyline once a season or so, the way DS9 did. But then cancellation put an end to that, and since the story that we did get doesn't really go anywhere, it just feels like having fun with those evil universe wrappings. And I know that's fine for many fans. Obviously, that's why it tops so many lists, but it isn't for me. Story is key, and I remember having a meh reaction in 2005 after those episodes first aired. But In a Mirror Darkly did give us a key part of what is happening on Discovery, the USS Defiant. And I'll talk more about that later in the notes section. So that was a long-winded way of me leading up to where we are now. When we heard some time back that Discovery was planning a trip to the Mirror Universe, because this wasn't exactly a well-kept secret, I was not excited. When it became clear that we would start the second part of Season 1 in the Mirror Universe, I was hopeful that the writers would do something a bit less expected. With those hopes, I formulated my Prime Universe theory, which I presented in episode 8 of this show. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it. You might find it interesting. I never really thought that's where we were headed, but I wanted to do it as a fun thought exercise, and I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, they might do something out of the box. But as I said on that show, the Mirror Universe was almost certainly our destination, and I was almost certainly wrong. And it was. And I was.
We are now the ISS Discovery.
More predictability from Discovery. It might also be worth noting that Mirror Mirror was one of the books on the shelf in Giorgio's ready room aboard the USS Shenzhou. Now that I've watched the episode 4 times, I'm warming up to it a bit. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It is a good episode for sheer entertainment value, and despite yourself is the most visually rich trip to the Mirror Universe that we've made. But I still have my initial feeling that it is too early to go to the Mirror Universe. We don't even really know our characters well enough yet, and this is how I feel about The Naked Now on TNG, and also Dramatis Personae on DS9. And it also feels like driving down the highway at 160 kilometers per hour, throwing the car into reverse and then jerking the wheel so that you fly off the road into a ditch. This sudden, drastic turn of events is very disruptive to the story that was being told in the first 9 episodes. I think a lot of viewers wanted to know what's going to happen next now that Cole's gone, now that we've broken the Klingon cloak. And then suddenly, we're just in this completely other story. You can imagine the frustration of some viewers. Anyway, we're here, so let's go with it. Obviously, the Mirror Universe is being presented in beautiful detail. I know that many fans marvel at seeing things such as the agony booth recreated with modern visual effects in HD, or even the fine detail of the emblems that they're going to wear on their uniforms. What I'm more interested in is what they can do with the story. So I have been thinking about what being in the mirror universe could mean for our characters. Burnham is obviously at the center of this. Lorca is also an interesting case, and then there's Stamets and Kolber. Oh, and Vogue. And I'll get to all of these in a moment. To move the story along, the writers are basically ignoring reality, and our crew has been able to gain almost complete detailed knowledge about this universe from a single data core retrieved from a rebel ship that just happened to be in the exact spot where they came out of their spore jump. And this knowledge includes things all the way down to the exact metals that should be worn on Captain Burnham's uniform so as not to raise any suspicion among her former crew. Okay, fine. It's fine. We don't have enough episodes at our disposal to have them actually work to get the information they need. The information they have obtained is critical for doing something with the characters, and that needed to happen immediately. So a quick solution for getting up to speed was essential. Okay, it's fine. Instead of worrying about identities, we're going to put all our energy into one specific bit of information not included in that data core, the details of the USS Defiant. Although, after 100 years of service, as the flagship of Empress Hoshi Sato's Terran Empire, you would think a lot of information would be available and would be part of that extremely detailed data core. But then we wouldn't have a reason to get Burnham back on her old ship, so yeah. One character who is key to the search for Defiant details is Lorca. There's been speculation all season about his origin. A popular theory is that he is from the mirror universe and is trying to get home. I don't really buy this. It seems that the primary basis for this idea is that he doesn't act like Starfleet captains we've known in the past. He's abrasive. He manipulates people for his own gain. He doesn't care much about the rules. In short, he's rough. Therefore, he must be from the mirror universe. This isn't a very good reason. In fact, I think Lorca is a much more realistic captain, certainly during wartime, than Kirk, Picard, or Janeway. I find him to be the most realistic captain we've ever had in Star Trek. But I'm not one to simply dismiss an idea or theory. Anything is possible. So in this episode, I looked for small things to support or refute the theory. There are certainly things that support the idea if you are keen on believing it. I think Isaacs is playing it that way on purpose. I don't think Lorca is from the mirror universe. But things I spotted that could suggest Lorca is from the mirror universe include the fact that he orders red alert and shields up as soon as the Vulcan cruiser powers weapons. I consider this nothing more than good military tactics and good command, but it could suggest that he knows the Vulcans will fire on them because he knows they are the enemy in this universe. But this would rely on him intentionally bringing them to the mirror universe, which I don't think he did. Saru's comment that it's an extremely fortunate coincidence that the 133 jumps filled in the gaps that allowed Lorca to determine the exact coordinates of some of the more esoteric destinations could suggest suspicion that Lorca ordered the jumps for that purpose, and that imaging to gather data to break the Klingon cloak was a convenient cover. But I think this is assuming too much. If you want to believe the theory that we've been watching Mirror Lorca try to get home, this could support that. It's a case of interpreting information so that it fits your preconceived views and agenda, something that is a really big problem in all aspects of life these days, when what you are seeing isn't there or isn't the intention. It really isn't clear how 133 jumps so close together that all you do is circle a ship could fill in the gaps on a galactic scale. But then again, there are a lot of convenient holes and assumptions in the writing of Discovery, so maybe. In the same scene, Lorca quickly dismisses the idea of examining the spore drive's navigational logs more closely and steers Burnham away. It seems clear that he doesn't want anyone to look at those logs because they will easily see that he overrode the coordinates just before the jump. In this regard, Lorca definitely changes the coordinates. He was up to something. He was trying to take them somewhere other than Starbase 46. But that doesn't mean he is Mirror Lorca, nor does it mean that he knew where they would end up. By the way, the idea of them not thoroughly checking the navigational logs is yet another convenient oversight that makes no sense from a real-world perspective, or maybe even from a past Star Trek perspective. This is one of the first things they would do. I find this to be one of the more implausible holes in the writing. Why wouldn't you check the logs? At the same time, in this episode, there are other things that could suggest Lorca isn't from the Mirror Universe. First, he seems genuinely unaware of their location. If he was bringing them to the Mirror Universe, he wasn't expecting to arrive in a debris field. His reactions on many occasions suggest that he is just as surprised as everyone else about the information they are discovering. Though I will say there are moments when he seems to know the role and behavior of Terrans in this universe a bit too well. We don't know how much time he is spending reading those records, though, and as a captain, especially one dedicated to studying war, I think it is reasonable to believe that he is a quick study. Now, of course, he could just be playing everyone with those reactions, and I was watching carefully for that, and there are times when I think maybe that's what he's doing, and there are times when I think, no, he's being genuine. So, again, I don't know, and I kind of feel like Isaacs is doing it on purpose to throw us off, make us wonder. There are subtle things, such as when Saru expresses surprise that a Vulcan and an Andorian were commanding a Klingon ship. Lorca gives him a look and a slight head shake, and both seem to be expressing genuine puzzlement. And he clearly didn't know that Tilly was the captain of the ISS Discovery. There are signals being given in both directions, but I think Lorca is native to the universe we've been watching up to this point, and not a refugee from the Mirror Universe. I do have another possibility for you to consider, though. What if Lorca is from another universe, just not the Mirror Universe? What if he has lost the Baran and his crew in his original native universe and has been jumping around, replacing the Lorca in various other universes, trying to find one in which his crew survived? In this episode, one of the first things he asks Burnham when they're speaking alone is my crew alive? So maybe he tried to jump at the end of Into the Forest I Go, thinking he would end up somewhere other than where they are now. I don't think this is the case either, but the point is that the Mirror Universe isn't the only option if you think he seems out of place. So let's talk about Tilly. Of course, Tilly is the captain. They dropped hints about this several times over the course of 9 episodes, the biggest being when Stamets called her captain after exiting the spore drive chamber. Stamets had also revealed that he could see all other universes, and Tilly told Burnham that she would be a captain someday, so we know she has that ambition and goal. Plus, she is the least likely person to be captain of the USS Discovery. So flip that around, Mirror Universe. All of these mean the reveal should have been no surprise, in my opinion. While I was watching, as soon as Burnham said, "You're not the captain," I thought, okay, Tilly's going to be the captain. Sure enough, screen comes up, Captain Sylvia Tilly. Or maybe we should call her Captain Killy.
Well, that's not very clever.
I don't have much else to say about Captain Killy right now, other than Mary Wiseman is fantastic in bouncing back and forth between the socially awkward Cadet Tilly and the confident and aggressive Captain Tilly, especially since she's having to portray someone who still has that awkwardness and that lack of confidence, and she's having to just push through it. It's just, I think, a really, really nice job in this episode by Wiseman. Next, let's talk about Ash Vogler. So, yes, Ash Tyler is Voq, or Voq is Ash Tyler, or, well, they are one, however you want to say it. This has to be the worst kept secret in Discovery. It's been obvious, to me anyway, since we first met Tyler in Choose Your Pain, that he was in some form Voq. And along the way, there have been so many hints. The day that the new episode titles were released, I read them and I immediately tweeted, "So Star Trek Discovery Episode 11 title is The Wolf Inside. Yep, Ash Vogler lives." When you look at the episode titles, you had to know, right? And then they released those posters where one of them was Voq. So then you knew, well, Voq's going to be involved in the rest of the season, but they didn't take Voq with them when they jumped to the Mirror Universe. I suppose you could encounter Mirror Voq, but nah, it's pretty obvious what was going on from the start. The first mistake in the writing, the big mistake in my opinion, was having him be encountered by Lorca on a Klingon ship captained by L'Rell, who has tracked down and abducted Lorca. I mean, if you've already told Voq that you have a way for him to win the war, and you know that Discovery is the key to Starfleet's defenses, and you tell Voq that he'll have to give up everything, and you tell Lorca that you are from a line of spies, and conveniently there is a human prisoner in the cell with Lorca, and you let them escape, and then you release the upcoming episode titles, and the first two are Despite Yourself and The Wolf Inside. It's just pedestrian storytelling. And that's fine, but given all that, the way that it was revealed in Despite Yourself, with the dialogue and with the music and with the voices as if it was some huge, shocking turn of events, was really a letdown for me. It just feels like the plot twists are being telegraphed in Discovery. Maybe it's because I watch each episode 4 times before doing this show each week, and so I'm really pulling out all the details. But I don't think that's all there is to it. I think that if you read a lot and you watch a lot of TV and movies, and most people watching Discovery do watch a lot of other stuff, you can see what's coming. And writers today must be more creative in how they weave their story. I think the Star Trek audience is more sophisticated than we are sometimes being given credit for in this storyline. So now we have to see what comes next. If you remember, on episode 5 of this show, I read extensively from the comic Beneath the Skin and described for you the process by which the Klingons transformed a puny warrior into Arn Darvin and sent him on a mission to Deep Space Station K7. The story is a prelude to the Trouble with Tribbles. Well, Tyler's flashbacks that we keep seeing mirror that process. It's what happened in the comics. And now, the explanation that Dr. Kolber gives Tyler in this episode also mirrors some of this. And in fact, I think Kolber pretty much explained exactly what is going on. The Klingons surgically altered Voq to appear human, not just his face and skin, but also his size, which is what they did to create Arn Darvin. And they overlaid the personality of Ash Tyler on top of Voq's. The physical being is Voq, and his personality and memories are still intact underneath Tyler's. But Ash Tyler really does believe that he is Ash Tyler, and that's something I've also said on here many, many episodes ago. L'Rell tried to trigger Voq in this episode, but it didn't quite work the way it was supposed to, so something has gone wrong. By now, we've seen the image from the Next Time on Star Trek Discovery preview, which I don't get on Netflix, but someone tweeted the screenshot of this, and so I was forced to see it, even though I didn't want to, of Tyler and Voq fighting each other. We'll find out soon what this is for sure, but my guess is that it isn't actually physical Tyler and physical Voq fighting, like they've been split into two beings or there's a mirror Voq or anything like that, but rather the two personalities fighting each other inside Vogler's mind. Maybe they should have just called an episode Being Ash Vogler. What's more interesting in all of this for me is how the resolution of Tyler's identity affects his relationship with Burnham. That's the mystery. Whether Tyler is Vogue never was. Which leads me to another thing I want to touch on that was never a mystery and also involves a relationship, the death of Kolber, which isn't really a death. Don't misunderstand what I am going to say about this, because I do understand why some people reacted with great dismay at this turn of events. But I think we also have to put our thoughts and reactions and the intentions of writers into context. We know it isn't really the death of Kolber because the producers had to come out right after the episode and assure everyone that he would be back because so many people freaked out. Actually, it seems they anticipated the reaction and were ready for it, knowing they couldn't just tell a story as they should be able to. The reaction from fans surprised me because when I watched the episode for the first time, when Tyler snapped Kolber's neck, I immediately said out loud to myself, as he was falling to the floor, "He isn't dead." I never thought for a second that they actually killed Kolber. This is Star Trek. His partner is lying on a bed right next to him with Gary Mitchell eyes. We're in a parallel universe. We're in a story based on the use of mycelia. And this is a show that has proudly, skillfully, and respectfully made a same-sex relationship an important part of the story. That's the context. From a storytelling perspective, you put Stamets in a position where he has to save the love of his life. The experience strengthens the bond between the two of them, and you make a statement about the nature of love between two people, and that it doesn't matter if they are heterosexual, homosexual, or whatever. They are just two people who care about one another. It's a positive message. I know there is this theory that gay couples in shows are not allowed to be happy, that they must be pulled apart as a way of sending a message to viewers that homosexuality is wrong. And maybe some writers do that intentionally. So, yes, I understand that the instant reaction might be one of shock and frustration. But this is Star Trek. These writers aren't going to put Stamets and Kolber together so they can then kill one of them and send everyone a message like that. It would be counter to everything that they've set up in developing this show. It feels sometimes that we no longer allow realistic storytelling. So far in Discovery, we've had outrage about the death of Georgiou. The writers wanted to get rid of the female Asian captain. The death of Landry. The writers wanted to get rid of the woman of color. And now the supposed death, that is obviously not a death, of Kolber. The writers wanted to send an anti-gay message. As I said after Landry's death, if our goal, and it is certainly a goal that I support, and I do so every day through my work, if our goal is to create a society in which diversity is the norm, and that everyone, regardless of skin color, gender, nationality, sexual orientation, has equal opportunity and is treated the same way, then anyone can find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. Landry died because she made a terrible decision while carrying out her duties as a security officer. Kolber was attacked by Tyler because, while performing his duties as a medical officer, he discovered Tyler's secret, or maybe L'Rell's secret would be more accurate. It had nothing to do with his gender, nothing to do with his sexual orientation, nothing to do with the color of his skin. None of that. In storytelling, we are going to have the deaths of characters who are female, who are gay, who are persons of color. That's reality. And Discovery assembled a diverse cast. That's what we wanted. If the writers aren't going to be allowed to treat these characters equally as regular people, without the fans becoming outraged every time there's a turn in the story, it's going to be very difficult to tell a story. I think it's unfortunate that the drama of this story element had to be spoiled immediately by the creators themselves, when we could have speculated for 1 week about how Kolber might be brought back by Stamets. Instead, we were told not to worry about it. Everything's fine. Stamets will still get his moment to save Kolber. Their relationship will be made stronger, but it won't be as special for the viewer anymore. All right, let's touch on one more thing. Who is the Emperor? It's Georgiou.
I knew we'd encounter familiar faces. But is this what it's going to be like here?
First and foremost, it's important to remember that Discovery is the story of Michael Burnham. Everything else is ancillary. What is the thing that Burnham most regrets? Allowing Georgiou to die. What is the biggest challenge that you could put in front of her? To have her face Georgiou and have to watch her die again to save your ship and crew, and maybe even be the one who has to kill her. It's also important to note that they were very careful in this episode not to use a pronoun when discussing the Emperor. They never said he is or she is. They stuck with the Emperor, and I don't think that was an accident. The alternative is that it turns out to be Harry Mudd. He was the Emperor of the Terran Empire in the Decipher role-playing game module Through a Glass Darkly. I hope they don't go down that road, but since he has been made part of the series, it's possible. But he's ruthless in Discovery's own universe. It wouldn't be much of a role change if he were such in this mirror universe. But I'm sure it will be Georgiou. Let's move on to notes.
Captain, we've reached the designated position for scanning the coded directive.
Good. We've both guessed right. Negotiations with the Klingon Empire are on the verge of breaking down. Starfleet Command anticipates a surprise attack. We are to proceed to Organia and take whatever steps are necessary to prevent the Klingons from using it as a base.
Strategically sound. Organia is the only Class M planet in the disputed area, ideally located for use by either side.
If you've seen the original series, and I know most of you have, but there is a growing number of Star Trek fans who haven't as younger fans come aboard, then you know that Organia is the setting of the episode Errand of Mercy, and that the Organians are responsible for forcing a treaty on the Klingons and the Federation that ended the Federation-Klingon War in 2267.
What have you done? As I stand here, I also stand upon the home planet of the Klingon Empire and the home planet of your Federation, Captain. I'm going to put a stop to this insane war.
You're what? You're talking nonsense.
It is being done.
You can't just stop the fleet. What gives you the right?
You can't interfere. What happens in space is not your business.
Unless both sides agree to an immediate cessation of hostilities, all your armed forces, wherever they may be, will be immediately immobilized.
This is the treaty that maintained relative peace between the two powers until the Khitomer Accords were drawn up in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. The Organians appeared again on Enterprise in the 4th season episode Observer Effect, when 2 Organians, which are non-corporeal beings, you'll recall, possessed the bodies of Reed and Mayweather to observe how the crew would react to infection and death.
I have such respect for you, Captain Archer.
Trell?
Not exactly. I'm an Organian. a non-physical life form. Trip is my host.
What did you do to him?
Nothing. We never interfere in the natural development of other species. We only observe.
References to Organia have appeared elsewhere on screen. The system can be seen on star charts and other displays in TNG's Inheritance, Generations, DS9's Whispers, and Voyager's Child's Play. And Worf also mentions the story of Errand of Mercy to Kor in DS9's The Sword of Kahless. And in Star Trek Into Darkness, jumping over to the Kelvin timeline, Starfleet was tracking Organian representatives in San Francisco on a map in Pike's office. And that's also because it had been the site of a skirmish between the Klingons and the Federation. In the literary universe, Organia appears in the famous 1970 TOS novel Spock Must Die by James Blish, and in the comic Against Their Nature, which is part of the Blood Will Tell series, and that's the same series that Beneath the Skin comes from, which I talked about earlier in reference to Tyler and Vogue. Organia is also part of the Starfleet Command video game. Next, let's talk about Isix.
Isik for your thoughts.
What's an Isik?
It's an old Vulcan saying. No one actually knows where it comes from.
Let's make it hard to cash in.
This appears to be a reference to Deep Space Nine. Although there is no Vulcan connection, and Isik is a currency used by the Vlugtans.
Martis, I've just received word the Blutta government has accepted my bid.
Well, that's wonderful. What's wrong?
They won't finalize the transaction until I commission a study on the effects of asteroid mining on intersystem navigation. All my money is committed to the bid. I can't afford the study, and I only have a week to get it done.
How much do you need?
10,000 Isiks.
10,000 Isiks? Well, it won't be easy to raise that kind of money.
I hope I can find an investor in time.
I might know someone.
Basically, in the second season episode Rivals, Alcia needed money to conduct a study as part of an effort to get mining rights to an asteroid. Now that I think of it, that sounds like something you'd read in the opening crawl of one of the Star Wars prequels. But anyway, she needs this money, and she needs it in Isiks. I'm not sure why the Vulcans would have an expression about Isiks, but maybe it's a currency that is widely traded and is commonly known on Vulcan. But pretty obscure reference that they threw in there. Now let's move on to one of the best tie-ins to be found in Despite Yourself, the Uss Defiant, NCC 1764.
Captain's log, stardate 5693.2. The Enterprise is approaching the last reported position of the starship Defiant, which vanished without trace 3 weeks ago. We are in unsurveyed territory.
This Constitution-class ship was first seen in the third season TOS episode The Tholian Web, in which it slips into interphasic space, and the ship and Kirk, who is examining it, pass into another universe.
Computer working.
Compute the next period of spatial interphase.
Next interphase, 2 hours, 12 minutes.
2 hours and 12 minutes? Why, that power leak has unbalanced the ship and she's starting to drift. I can't hold her in place that long.
We must try, Mr. Scott. The fabric of space is very weak here. If we disturb it, there will be no chance of retrieving the captain alive.
I don't understand what's so special about this region of space.
Picture it this way, Mr. Chekhov. We exist in a universe which coexists with a multitude of others in the same physical space. At certain brief periods of time, an area of their space overlaps an area of ours. That is the time of interphase during which we can connect with the Defiant's universe.
We see the Defiant again in the Enterprise episode In a Mirror Darkly, and learn that when it slipped into that interphasic space, it actually wound up in the Mirror universe. But it didn't just move from one universe to another, it went roughly a century back in time.
This ship is designed to be operated by a crew of 400. There are only 47 of us. The logical course of action is to take Defiant to Earth, allow Starfleet to study it, Reverse engineer its system.
There's no time. The Empire could lose this war in a matter of weeks if we don't get the Defiant and its weapons to the front lines. Dismissed!
Ultimately, Hoshi takes command and declares herself Empress of the Terran Empire. She uses the advanced weaponry of the Defiant to secure her power and rules for 122 years. That last fact comes from the novella Age of the Empress. There's one little potential glitch in tying Discovery into the story that has been told about the Defiant, its role in a Mirror Darkly and the subsequent rule of Hoshi Sato. In David Mack's Sorrows of the Empire, we learn that Sato ruled until she was assassinated by Spock. So Sato, actually it is the second clone of Sato, Empress Hoshi Sato III, is still in power at the time that Prime Universe Kirk meets Mirror Universe Spock in Mirror Mirror. And yes, I know that's a lot of retconning going on there, but stick with me. This would mean that if Discovery is true to the timeline, and they are under no obligation, of course, to follow events in the literary universe, although they have been borrowing from it, the Emperor, as they refer to this person in Despite Yourself, would be Hoshi Sato. But because Discovery is taking place in 2256, it would be Hoshi Sato II, the first clone of Hoshi Sato, who ruled until 2267, and was then replaced by Hoshi Sato III. Since Discovery is borrowing the Enterprise plot regarding Defiant, it would make sense for them to consider what happened to Empress Sato. But, as I said earlier, I'm sure it will be Giorgio. So, does this mean that we're not in the Mirror Universe, but some other Mirror Universe? There are a lot of small details that suggest this, including the wireframe of the Defiant, which doesn't quite match what it should look like. But on that point, let's keep in mind that engineers from the Terran Empire would have been modifying the ship for a century at this point. Not only modifying it, but trying to reverse engineer its advanced technology, especially its weapon systems, so that it could be implemented in other ships. This is, in fact, mentioned in the literature, so it's no surprise that the Defiant might look a bit different here. If you dig into the literary universe, there are actually conflicting accounts of what happened to the Defiant and how its story played out. I'm not going to go into all of those here, because if I did, the show would get really long. I'm going to leave it at the connection to Enterprise, but if you're interested in other places to find the Defiant, it appears in or is referenced in Constitution, Book 2 of the My Brother's Keeper trilogy by Michael Jan Friedman, published in 1999, the two-part Starfleet Corps of Engineers Interphase from 2001, written by Dayton Ward and Kevin Dillmore, The Fire and the Rose, the Spock book in the Crucible series, written by David R. George III and published in 2006, the Vanguard novel Precipice by David Mack, published in 2009, and the Vanguard novel What Judgments May Come by Dayton Ward and Kevin Dillmore, published in 2011. Lastly, let's talk about the Mirror Universe a bit more, because I've talked about it on and off all through this show. Use of the Mirror Universe in Star Trek is extensive, so as I mentioned up front, I'm not going to attempt an exhaustive analysis of it in a single episode. On screen, we have visited the Mirror Universe in 8 episodes. In a Mirror Darkly, Parts 1 and 2 on Enterprise, Mirror Mirror on the original series, which was of course the very first time, and in 5 episodes of Deep Space Nine, Crossover, Through the Looking Glass, Shattered Mirror, Resurrection, and The Emperor's New Cloak. Not counted in my total is a Star Trek Continues episode, Fairest of Them All, which is a direct continuation of Mirror Mirror, and it's actually a very good episode. I recommend that you go watch it. In the literary universe, there are 30 novels, novellas, or short stories featuring the Mirror Universe. One of them, which I mentioned earlier, Sorrows of the Empire, was originally published as a novella, part of a collection, and then expanded into a full novel. So I'm going to count that one as 2, which gives us 30. In addition to that, there are 23 comics, at least 3 RPG modules, and 2 video games that incorporate the mirror universe. So that total comes to 68, and I'm probably missing something. Needless to say, the mirror universe is popular. Many of the mirror universe stories in the literature are found in collections, and these include Glass Empires, which has stories by Dayton Ward, Kevin Dillmore, David Mack, Greg Cox, and Mike Sussman, who also wrote Enterprise's In a Mirror Darkly. That collection was published in 2007. Also in 2007, Obsidian Alliances was published with stories by Peter David, Keith DeCandido, and Sarah Shaw. And in 2009, we got Shards and Shadows with stories by Dave Stern, Dayton Ward, Kevin Dillmore, Margaret Wander Bonanno, James Swallow, Michael Jan Friedman, Rudy Josephs, Susan Wright, Keith DeCandido, Peter David, Jim Johnson, Christopher L. Bennett, and David Mack. So those 3 collections will give you a wealth of stories set in the mirror universe. There are also novels. 3, a Stargazer novel by Michael Jan Friedman, published in 2003. Warpath, a DS9 novel by David Mack, published in 2006. Another DS9 novel, Fearful Symmetry, written by Olivia Woods and published in 2008. The Soul Key, another Olivia Woods DS9 novel published in 2009, and Rise Like Lions by David Mack from 2011. William Shatner's trilogy, Spectre, Dark Victory, and Preserver, also take place in the mirror universe. And this is not a comprehensive list, but you get the idea. And these are good starting points if you want to get into the literary mirror universe, especially those 3 collections, Glass Empires, Obsidian Alliances, and Shards and Shadows. For the purpose of discovery, perhaps the most relevant mirror universe stories are Enterprise's In a Mirror Darkly and the novella Age of the Empress, which continues the events of the Enterprise episode and follows the reign of Empress Hoshi Sato. This story was crafted by Mike Sussman and written by the duo of Dayton Ward and Kevin Dillmore. But I think it's worth asking, is this the mirror universe of TOS and DS9 that we now find ourselves in Discovery? Is it even the mirror universe of Enterprise? Sure, the Defiant is there, but it looks a bit different. The map of Earth shown on the Terran Empire logo is reversed, which was never the case before. The uniforms obviously don't jive with those of Mirror Mirror, but they do work well as a variation of the Discovery uniforms, as you would expect. I've said before that in Star Trek, the mirror universe is not just another parallel universe, but rather a very specific universe. This is true if your starting point is what we call the prime universe. But we have seen in the comics that there is a mirror universe connected to the Kelvin timeline. That suggests that, of the countless universes that exist under the multiverse theory, there are universes that are tethered to one another, creating this kind of pairing that we have seen in stories set in the prime timeline and the Kelvin timeline. It could also be argued that these 2 timelines take place in the same universe, but I don't think that meshes with real scientific theory. The point of the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics is that a new universe is created each time a decision is made. I decide that I'm going to record this podcast, and in that universe, I keep going forward. But another universe is also created in which I decided not to record this podcast. Now we have 2 universes. We don't have 2 timelines. In one universe, we have 2 universes. I'm still not convinced that Discovery, as we have seen it up to this point, is set in the prime universe. I know the writers have told us that it's set in the prime universe, but maybe we're not there yet. I don't know. If that's the case, everything about my theory, presented in Notes from the Edge 8, still holds true, except for the jump to the prime universe at the end of Into the Forest I Go. And if that's all true, this mirror universe would be the one tethered to whatever parallel universe Discovery is taking place in. Things are almost the same. Many events still took place, such as the Uss Defiant moving between universes, but the details may differ slightly. The Defiant's design could be different, and Earth's land masses could be reversed. But then again, I must say that, in all likelihood, Discovery probably is set in the Prime Universe, and this probably is the same mirror universe that we saw in TOS, DS9, and Enterprise. And the differences we see in things such as the Terran Empire emblem are probably just creative license. You know, it looks cooler that way. So far, although fans love to look really deep at possible connections and formulate very clever theories and plot twists, the best way to anticipate what will happen on Discovery is to consider the most obvious choice and run with it. The approach has yet to fail. All right, so those are the notes from the Edge for week 10 of Star Trek Discovery. Notes is just part of our coverage of Star Trek Discovery. Be sure to check out our coverage throughout the week. On Monday nights at 9 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, Brandy and Bruce go live on YouTube with Live from the Edge, and you can take part in the show by interacting with them on Twitter or through chat. If you can't join live, you can still listen to the show on Tuesday mornings when it is released as a podcast. Commentary tracks will be available each Wednesday as Tracks from the Edge with Mike, and we'll discuss your feedback on Postcards from the Edge with Amy on Thursdays. And of course, you can catch the full analysis on the Edge main show with Brandon on Friday. I'll be wrapping up things each week here on Notes from the Edge on Saturdays with this kind of deep dive into the links between Discovery and the broader franchise. You'll find all of these in the main feed for the Edge and in the Trek.fm master feed. I should also mention that sometimes, like this week, Notes comes out on Sunday. It depends on my schedule and when I'm able to actually be in my studio to record the show. All along the way, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Discovery. The best place to do that is in the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook, where Amy Nelson will collect your feedback for Postcards from the Edge. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook if you're not yet a member, and it should come right up. It is a closed group, so you're going to need to click Join if you're not yet a member. And you also need to answer 2 questions now to enter, and they're very simple questions. And we just want to make sure that the people coming in are actually listeners of the network and not spammers, so that we can make it a great place for all of you listening to talk to each other about Star Trek. You can also find us on Twitter at Trek.fm or send us email using the contact form on our website at Trek.fm/contact. Just choose to send to a show and choose the Edge, and that message will go to all the hosts from all the different sub-shows of the Edge. If you'd like to find me personally, you can find me there in the Babel Conference, of course, but perhaps the best place to converse with me is on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. My username is C Bryan Jones, letter C, and Bryan with a Y, and that's my name pretty much everywhere in social media. If you'd like to hear me discuss Star Trek beyond Discovery, you can catch my main show, The Ready Room, and I also co-host The Orb, our Deep Space Nine podcast with Matthew Rushing. And the good news is that this week, I have new episodes of both coming out. Larry Nemeczek and I got together again for a new Ready Room, and Matthew and I got together for an Orb, and in both cases, we're talking about Deep Space Nine, and we're looking back at the 25th anniversary, but we're doing it from different angles, so I think you'll enjoy both shows if you're a Niner. And Larry and I talk about some other topics in the news segment. You'll also hear me on lots of older episodes from various shows, as I used to host 7 shows every week, and I started many of the shows that are now hosted by other people. And you can find my writing about Star Trek on the official website at StarTrek.com. I'd like to take a moment and thank our associate producers of The Edge, Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, and Cornelia Reutner. Hopefully I'm pronouncing everyone's names correctly there. If I'm not, ping me and let me know. But I really appreciate your support of the network. It really would not be possible for us to get The Edge out to everyone or any of our other shows without your help. So thank you so much. I really sincerely appreciate your support. And if you're listening and you want to support this show or everything else we're doing on the network, you can do that by going to patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM. You can get all the details there. We have things like the Patrons Roundtable, where you can talk about Star Trek on mic, the way we do on our various podcasts with some of our hosts and other listeners. And those shows, they've always been available in the master feed, but they're now available on our main website, and you'll even see cover art with all of our other covers for Patrons Roundtable. So you can go and check that out and find out what it's all about. We also have a special website called Patron Zone for our patrons. So visit patreon.com/TrekFM to find out everything you need to know. And I do hope you'll support us, and I really, really do appreciate it. Well, that's all I have for you this time. Thank you so much for listening. I know it was a bit of a long show, covered a lot of ground, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join me again next time as we jot down more notes right on the paper's edge.